Hi. So in this video, we're going to go over some of the key problems in homework 1 so it doesn't get too long. I think you all showed a pretty good grasp of some of the easier ones. So I've worked out all the answers. You can pause the video if you want to see what they look like. I symbolized 1 through 10 and 21 through 30. I will read, not all of them, like I said, only the key ones that seem confusing, and then the answers for 21 through 30 are symbolized as well. And I'll hold that up so you can stare at them for a while and check with your answers. So let's begin with problems 1 through 10 and the more difficult ones. Most of you had questions about number 4, which was a neither nor. I hope the summary of connectives made that clear, but let's read the sentence. It says, neither Bob nor Carol jogs regularly. And the way you symbolize that one is tilde, parentheses, open parentheses, Bob or B, wedge C, close parentheses. Now, the reason why you do that is because if you notice, the neither nor, it ranges over everything that the sentence is saying, those two atomic sentences contained within. So that's why we put the tilde on the outside of the parentheses and then B wedge C on the inside. If you'll notice, the summary of connectives says that you can also state that as tilde B ampersand C. And the reason for that is because once you take that negation inside the parentheses, it does just like in math. It changes the B to negative and the C to negative, and the sign in the middle then becomes an ampersand instead of a wedge. That's De Morgan's law, essentially, for those of you familiar with math. Another one that people seemed to have a little bit of trouble with was number 6. It says, Albert and Carol and Bob do not jog regularly. Now, the way I symbolize that one, I'll hold it up again, was I negated each one individually with the ampersand in between. Now, the reason for that is because the statement doesn't say Albert, like it didn't say Albert and Carol and Bob all do not jog regularly, right? Or do not all jog regularly is the more logically correct way to say that if we wanted to put everything in parentheses with the negation on the outside. You always have to keep in mind those types of key words. And we see this a little bit more clearly with number 7. So with number 7, the way I symbolized it and the reasons for that, it's a disjunction on the left and then a conjunction on the right. The but is another way of saying and. It's another way of saying a conjunction. So that is the main operator for the large complex statement. So, of course, it's parentheses, B wedge A, close parentheses, and then ampersand. And then this part is important. It says they don't both. Don't both tells you that you should put the negation, and then because it says both, it means that we are grouping whatever the statement is trying to say inside some parentheses, because the don't both means the negation ranges over the grouping. So then it would be, tilde, parentheses, B, ampersand A, close parentheses. Number 8 is another tricky one. If you look at your summary of connectives, it says that although is also an indicator that we're looking at a conjunctive statement. So you should have put tilde C ampersand and then parentheses B wedge A closed parentheses. Number 9, similarly, if you notice, it's not saying it is not the case that all of these people jog regularly. It's saying it's because of the way we use English that we just kind of group things together, but that negation doesn't range over everything. So it doesn't say that they don't all jog regularly. It's just meant to say that individually they don't jog regularly, right? Because if you notice, since it's a disjunction for number 9, if it was really the negation with the parentheses and everything else disjuncted inside, it would have said neither Albert, Bob, nor Carol jogs regularly. That's when you put the negation and everything else inside the parentheses. So that's a big clue. Since it says it is not the case, it means that we have to treat each one individually. So it would be tilde A, wedge, tilde B, wedge, tilde C. That one's pretty easy. Let's see. Number 13 and 14. Those are both neither nor. It's just neither Albert nor Carol jogs regularly. 13 is the more true to form way of saying neither nor, and 14 is the equivalent way of symbolizing that, where you bring negation inside, as I stated earlier, and then it changes the A to negated A, wedge to an ampersand, and then C to negated C. 15. Some of you had some questions about that one. That one is simply, you read it across the way you look at it. You simply say, it is not the case that Bob does not jog regularly. You could have also said, as some people recognized, having some knowledge of mathematics, that the double negation is just stating the statement without a negation, so Bob jogs regularly would have been acceptable. You should note, and I did this in the video as well, but it's like math with negation. If there are an even number of negations, the statement becomes positive. And if there are an odd number of negations, then the statement is negative. Okay, so let me see what other ones. Number 17. That one you could just do straight across if you wanted to. You could have just said either Albert jogs regularly or Carol jogs regularly, comma. Then the and, you could have put and they don't both jog regularly, or you could have said but, since it sounds better in terms of grammar, you could have just said but they don't both jog regularly. Number 18. Some of you just wrote it out all the way across, not minding the parentheses, and that's fine because, there are rules of logic and mathematics that show that you can just bounce those parentheses around without losing anything. But if we want to translate that back into English properly, we would have said, because the parentheses is grouping Albert and Carol together, we would have said both Albert and Carol jog regularly. And then you could have put a comma on it, and so does Bob. Number 19 is like, where is it? Is like number 9. Except that those parentheses then tell us that we have to word the statement a little weirdly. So you would say either Albert doesn't jog regularly, or, comma, it is not the case that Bob jogs regularly, or it is not the case that Carol jogs regularly. You could have said it that way, and it would have been fine. Number 20 simply says either Bob or Carol jogs regularly, or neither of them does, right? You'd say neither Bob nor Carol jogs regularly if you want to spell it all the way out. Now, let me hold up. Give me a second. Let me hold up my answers symbolized for numbers 21 through 30. And I did these in rather large print. That way, and excuse the chicken scratch. There we go. You can pause the video if you want to look at all the symbolizing that I've done here, or symbolizations if I'm going to speak proper English. Excuse that. I get a little sloppy sometimes. It's the morning. I'm still working on my coffee, right? So, 21. I will also state the way you should have symbolized these. So that way I don't have to keep holding that up and making it look all wonky. So 21 says, if Parsons signs the papers, Quincy goes to jail, comma, and if Rachel files an appeal, Quincy goes to jail. So with complex statements, it's always best to identify which operator is the one doing all the heavy work for the entire sentence. And in this case, it's that little and in the middle. So this is a giant conjunction. So on the left of the ampersand, you should have in parentheses P arrow Q. And to the right, you should have in parentheses R arrow Q. 22. Quincy goes to jail, comma, if either Parsons signs the papers or Rachel files an appeal. So again, as I stated in the video, the if is a big clue as to what's going on in this entire sentence. It tells you that this whole thing is a giant conditional. And the if by itself says that in that conditional, the antecedent is either Parsons signs the papers or Rachel files an appeal. So what you should have done was put some parentheses, P wedge R, close the parentheses, arrow Q. 23. Either Parsons signs the papers or, comma, if Quincy goes to jail, then Rachel files an appeal, right? So this one is pretty straightforward. The either or tells you that since it's not embedded in anything else, it tells you that the disjunction is the major operator here. So it would simply be P wedge and then in parentheses Q arrow R. 24. Rachel will file an appeal, comma, provided that either Parsons signs the papers or Quincy goes to jail. So here, the key word is provided. It's working exactly like if all by itself. Since it's provided, it tells you that whatever follows is going to be the antecedent of a conditional. And this is one big, massive conditional. So if you want in your mind, whenever you see this stuff, switch it around in your mind first so that you can read the sentence in the proper conditional form, which is provided that either Parsons signs the papers or Quincy goes to jail, then Rachel will file an appeal. Kind of helps you out that way. So we know now that this statement should have been symbolized as parentheses, P wedge Q, close parentheses, arrow R. 25. Given that either Quincy will go to jail or Rachel will file an appeal, comma, Parsons signs the papers. Given is another one of those words that indicates what we're looking at is a conditional statement. Since it's at the beginning, we know that given, like if by itself or provided, indicates that the antecedent follows before the consequent. So it would be parentheses, Q, wedge, R, close parentheses, arrow P. 26. Our favorite, unless, right? So 26 is simply, you could have said it in three ways as shown on the summary of connectives. You could have either said Q, wedge, R, which is acceptable, or you could have said tilde Q, arrow R, or you could have said tilde R, arrow Q. Now, a quick note, I kind of said it in passing in the video, but I'll say it again because it's important. So you understand it, even if you don't know it, what it looks like. The reason why those three types of statements are all equivalent to each other is that in logic, we can find the truth values for every version of those statements by constructing a truth table. For those of you familiar with a little bit of coding, it's like doing all the ones and zeros, right? So when you do that, for each type of statement, the Q wedge R, or not Q then R, or not R then Q. When you do that, you find that the T's or F's under the main operator of the entire sentence looks exactly the same for each of those three statements. And that's why you can say those three different things and still mean the same thing. So in this one, it's simply, like I said, you could say Q wedge R, tilde Q, arrow R, or tilde R, arrow Q. 27. This one was a little bit of a curveball. I put unless at the front. So this was to get you to notice something that you should have first read the sentence, saw the comma. Oh, so the unless tells us that it's starting from what is normally on the right side. It's starting with that first. So you should have rearranged it so you could read the sentence in its proper form, which is, it is not the case that Quincy will not go to jail unless Parsons signs the papers and Rachel files an appeal. So let me show you what I did here for number 27. It's real sloppy, so I apologize for that. But, right? I went ahead and put that not Q in parentheses because the not Q is what the sentence gives us. But the negation outside of the Q, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Whenever, standard form, it's a not P unless, not P arrow Q. So in this sense, excuse me, the screen's going dark. So in this one, it's the same situation. It's the statement that we're given is itself saying it is not the case, the Q, right? Arrow, then parentheses, P, ampersand, R, close parentheses, right? But because standard form tells us that we have to negate whatever is given to us in the statement, I also put that negation outside of the not Q, and I put the parentheses around that not Q to show that that's what's given to us. You don't have to do that. If this were a real logic assignment, you would just put not Q. And then, of course, you could do the rest in a similar fashion. Numbers 28 and 29 are actually the same. Same way, logically, they are the same statement. But in English, two different ways of stating it. I started off with the only if on number 28, which tells us, what follows is the consequent. And in the middle, it says, will Rachel file an appeal? And that's just a matter of standard English grammar to make it sound right. Because it would have sounded weird if I had said, only if Quincy goes to jail, comma, Rachel files an appeal. I guess I could have said that. But I put the will in there so that way it would sound a little more normal. But the only if is a big indicator that what follows is a consequent. So in this case, if you want to read it properly, you would have switched the last part to the front. And so it would read, Rachel files an appeal only if Quincy goes to jail. That then becomes R arrow Q. Again, because only if tells us that the consequent follows. But on 29, it says Quincy goes to jail if, by itself, Rachel files an appeal. And if, by itself, tells us, once again, that we're looking at the antecedent to follow. So if you want in your mind, you see the if by itself, you switch it around so it reads, if Rachel files an appeal, then Quincy goes to jail, which is simply R arrow Q. Similarly with number 30, you read this whole giant statement, and it starts with either. So that's a very key thing. That tells us then that the whole statement is a disjunction. So it's R, wedge, and then whatever comes after the wedge, which is Parsons doesn't sign the papers only if Quincy doesn't go to jail. So in parentheses, you would put tilde P, arrow, tilde Q. And that's it. I hope this helped. You all have been doing a pretty good job otherwise. And like I said, this isn't a logic class. I'm just getting you guys familiarized with the way logic works in language, because philosophers are notorious for using real strict logical speak. So that's it. Enjoy your weekend. Next week, we're going to cover Plato. It's going to be Plato all week long. We're going to go over the Euthyphro. We're going to go over the Ringa Gyges, and also the Allegory of the Cave, which is a very popular story that most of you will hear. So instead of having you read that, I'm just going to go ahead and show you all a video, an old school video with Orson Welles doing the presentation, and there's animation to go along with it. That's really cool. So we'll go over the homework at some point next week. Hopefully by Monday or Tuesday, I'll have responses. Tuesday, because I guess Monday is when the homework 2 is done. So hopefully Tuesday I can have those answers up for you. Again, remember, these logic assignments, they're graded for completion, not correctness, because this is not a logic class. I just want you all to start familiarizing yourself with how to use sentential logic. When you read an argument and it's staring you in the face, you can then say, okay, I'm a little bit confused, but if I go ahead and use these symbols, I can wipe away all the fluff and then see the logical structure of the argument before my eyes. All right. Have a good weekend.